We were just kids without parents, wanting to enjoy the Minecraft movie. And suddenly the man behind us started acting strange and showed something unclear to me. Hello again, friends. Tonight, we have something truly special for you. From creepy Minecraft stories to disturbing tales from real life, each one is designed to send chills down your spine. We bring every story to life with careful attention to detail, using different voices to match each unique narrator. So turn off the lights, get cozy, and let yourself sink into the atmosphere. Good night, and enjoy the experience. Yesterday, I went with 6 of my friends to see the Minecraft movie. We are all 16, except for my friend's little sister, who is 10. We were all sitting in the row behind the handicapped row. There were a few other people in the top rows, and one middle-aged man sitting directly behind us. There's a trend on the internet where when Jack Black says chicken jockey, everybody stands up and cheers. Me and my friends did, and as I was cheering, I looked behind me. The guy in the row behind us was very clearly pleasuring himself, making direct eye contact with us. I immediately sat back down. I sat for like 5 or so minutes just trying to figure out what to do. I told my friends I was going to the bathroom. I ended up telling an employee who came into the theater to tell the man he needed to leave. He complied, just getting up and leaving with the employee. Once the movie was over, I told my friends what I saw. We were all very creeped out. 90% he was engaging in inappropriate behavior to me and my friends, unless he was just jerking to the damn Minecraft movie. Either way, it was deeply unsettling. I don't know what happened to him. He probably just got told to leave, but that has to be a crime, right? Public indecency? I'm not sure. But creepy guy at the Minecraft movie, let's not meet again.
A few years ago in my mid-teens, I had gone for a run in the local woods, as I often did at the time, and decided to stop and mess around on a rope swing for a couple minutes. For context, the swing was about 20 meters back from the path, but was in full view of it. I saw a man start walking down the path and thought nothing of it initially, as his clothing suggested he might also have been jogging. Despite this, I decided to move out of his eye line for some stupid reason, such as my damp, messy hair or unshaven legs, while acting like I hadn't seen him yet and just happened to be moving on. I ended up walking parallel to the path as there is a nearby fallen tree that shields the entire area from view for a long way. Thinking of returning to the rope swing when he'd left the area, I peeked out from behind the trunk to watch, only to find that he had turned off the path and was walking in my direction. Although this wasn't immediately suspicious, it seemed odd to me as that section of woodland doesn't lead anywhere at all, and he was walking unusually fast. I quickly realized that I was not fully hidden behind the tree when he made eye contact with me and sped up slightly. Immediately had alarm bells going off in my head, and I just turned and booked it to where I knew there was a tiny set of steps, carved out of the dirt that led up small cliffs separating that area of the forest. The idiot I was, I panicked and started running so quickly that I never took out my earbuds, and had no idea if I was hearing running footsteps following me or not. I didn't even look back once, just got myself out of there. At the top of the steps, I followed a small dirt track to a more secluded chalk pit area of the woods, hiding in some trees and trying to call my friend, but had no signal. Looking back, I really wish I'd called the police there but I couldn't be sure that I wasn't somehow freaking out over nothing, and the whole thing had been a mistake on my part. After a while, I heard voices out on the dirt track, and a man saying something about not being able to find a her, which made my stomach drop. This was followed by glimpses of a vehicle and the sound of an engine driving away, which I then saw leaving the area on a higher road, though some scrubbling back to civilization. I waited a few more minutes before sprinting the entire way home, running off the last dregs of my adrenaline, then walking into my house and pretending like nothing had happened, I knew my parents would never let me go running again if they found out. To this day, I obsess over it, wondering if I somehow grossly misread the situation or worse, thinking about what could have happened to me if I hadn't escaped. Either way, I still can't shake the immediate spike of cold dread I felt when I watched him step off the path. Maybe instinct knew something I didn't. I guess I'll never really know.
This is a completely true story and just happened an hour ago. Wanted to talk about it somewhere, and the only place I could think of was surprisingly this subreddit. For context, my wife and I are on vacation in Mexico. We both honestly are loving it here, and this situation doesn't change that, but I am reevaluating security. My wife and I went out to dinner and walked back to our hotel. We get inside our room, are setting things down, etc. A few minutes go by and there's a knock at the door. A man quietly says something in Spanish in an inflection that's trying to get our attention. Think room service or something. My wife looks at me like wondering who would be at the door. At this point, I should clarify that we had the "Do Not Disturb" tag on the door. A few seconds go by and there's another knock at the door. My wife signals for me to go to the door and so I go over. At this point, we've made no sounds for probably a minute before and during the knocks. Just as I reached the door, the key card unlocked the door and it opened. A dirty-looking man had just opened the door and is about 2 feet from my face. I put my hand on the door to prevent it opening any further. I think he was as surprised as I was. He starts speaking Spanish and I hear the word Wi-Fi somewhere in there. I say, "No hablo español." In broken English, he tries to ask if the Wi-Fi is down. My wife says it's not. I'm just kind of shell-shocked by what just happened and keep my hand on the door as he talks and eventually leaves. I shut the door and engage the physical lock this time. I usually do this, but we had just walked in and wanted to set stuff down. I talk with my wife as we try to gather our thoughts about what just happened. Essentially, a man knocked, got no reply, then let himself in and asked about Wi-Fi. No, this was a clear burglary attempt, and he has a master key card and thought we weren't home. A minute or two later after this went down and we've collected ourselves and understood what just occurred, I pass this information to the front desk in case this guy attempts other doors. They seem to take it seriously. No updates beyond that. The fact this just happened has my mind kind of blown, and I don't know if I've fully processed it yet. Like, what if we were back 30 minutes later? Probably would have lost some stuff 5 minutes later. We walk in on a guy in our hotel room. What if we went to bed earlier tonight? Could have been asleep. The AC is loud and I don't know if I would have heard the door knocking through my sleep. If it was going to go down, surely the way it did was optimal, but those ifs are crazy. I'll definitely be storing our valuables in the safe now. Should have done this too, but we just recently got here. Lesson learned. In the future, stuff is going immediately into the safe and lock is getting immediately engaged.
I came across this community just today and remembered something that happened to me and 2 of my friends almost 20 years ago. So the memories are a little blurry. The 3 of us were at the ripe age of 5 to 6, and we were already pretty good friends since our older sisters went to the same class. So we were pretty excited to join in on their school's field trip to Transylvania for a couple of days. We visited numerous museums and other cultural and historical sites. On one of those days, we visited the ruins of a historical castle, which was beside a village on a smaller mountain surrounded by forests and roads leading to bigger towns. Ruins like this are all over Transylvania, so it didn't have much infrastructure, except for a parking lot and the roads connected to it. After the mandatory inspection of the ruin, the teachers allowed the class and US3 bozos to have an hour of free time for playing on the note not to go too far. We played hide and seek with the older kids of my sister's class. Both my friends and myself had a beef with our older sisters, and we thought this would be an opportunity like no other to show them who the superior beings are in our families. So when it was our turn to hide, we came up with the plan to ignore our teacher's words and hide somewhere they would never find us. We started to run towards the ruins of the castle and hid at the parking lot behind it. It was a little further away than we were allowed to go from the place where our Tekahers and my sister's class was, and definitely out of sight. Our plan was to scare the shit out of our sisters, and only come out victoriously when they have had multiple panic attacks. There were only a handful of cars, and only a person or two except for us. The game started a while ago, and we were hiding behind a car when an older man around 40 approached us. He had a mustache, a beer belly, and was around 5 feet 7 inches tall. It was obvious that he listened to us talk and giggle about what a great hiding spot we found. With a smile, he suggested that we should hide in the back of his car and pointed at an old and rather trashy car. Now, this is the moment where any kid with a basic set of survival instincts would run back to the teachers and tell everything. But not me and one of my friends. The guy even suggested that he would cover us with a couple of blankets once we hide in the back seat. I was so excited about beating my sister in a silly game that I didn't even realize how creepy that sounds. So I said okay with the mentioned similarly excited friend of mine. Lucky for us, the third kid in our friend group still had his sanity so politely refused and suggested that we should get back to the teachers. The guy tried to convince us a couple of times, but I guess he didn't want to risk being more aggressive with a whole class and teachers in the nearby, so we could leave and walk back to the others disappointed and confused why our friend was such a buzzkill. We didn't talk about what happened to our teachers, nor to anyone after, because despite how weird it was, we couldn't tell for sure if the stranger was actually a bad guy. Looking back, it was definitely a bad call, but we weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I'm not entirely sure if the guy really wanted to do something horrible to us or he was just being friendly, but looking back, it was definitely creepy. Long story short, don't get into strangers' cars no matter how much it would piss off your sister. And to the stranger who wanted 3 kids in the back seat of his car, let's never meet again.
When I was a freshman in college, I used to sit in this sort of indoor break area between the library and computer lab while waiting for my classes. I didn't know a whole lot of people yet, and the student union was always loud, so I really liked this place to study and relax in since there was hardly anyone ever there. Well, one day I was walking to the break area to wait for my next class, and I noticed a guy in his late 50s, early 60s close behind me. I held the door open for him, and he said, "Thank you." I just nodded and went to one of the couches, and he followed me, kind of blocked me in between the couches and the door, and began a conversation. It was pretty normal at first, just, "Oh, it's nice to see young people who are respectful" type BS. I am not very confrontational, so I didn't know how to stop the conversation. I was looking at my phone and trying to end the conversation with a "ha ha, yeah. Well, it was nice talking to you," but he didn't get the hint. Then it took a weird turn. He asked if I was Latina, and I said yes, and he said, "Yeah, I can tell, because Latina women either have huge tits or a fat ass, but never both." And I just looked up from my phone and said, "Excuse me?" And he started rambling about how sexy Latina women were, and other explicit comments. So I cut him off and said, "I'm sorry, I need to go. I forgot I have work today." So I grabbed my bag that I didn't even unpack, pushed past him, and he started to follow me as I began walking out of the break area. He asked where I worked. I told him, "Oh, super far away, so I need to go." He kept insisting I tell him where I worked and that he should walk me to my car. I told him no and started to pick up the pace, and he kept following me and keeping pace, saying, "Pretty young ladies shouldn't walk alone." I then yelled, "Leave me alone," and ran into the library. I was inside and looked through the glass doors, and this dude was waiting by the doors. He seriously was standing there trying to look in and see where I was. He wouldn't come in though, which was weird. Then the librarian at the info desk asked if I was okay, and I broke down. I apologized for maybe overreacting, but she reassured me and called campus police. She let me sit behind the desk, and we saw the guy take off. I was too scared to leave though, and finally campus security came, which I gave them a description of him. They had me wait in the library, and after about 10-ish minutes, the campus police said that they think they found the dude in the parking lot. They took me on their golf cart, and we parked behind a wall so I wouldn't have to confront him but could still ID him, and sure enough, it was him. They took him away, then escorted me to my car. A couple days later, I was called to the Title YX office for a follow-up. They asked me for details and then told me that the campus police had found him walking in between cars and looking into them. When they apprehended him, they scanned his driver's license, and turns out this dude had already been banned from campus because he already had harassed 4 other women. He wasn't even a student at any point. This dude would literally show up and creep on women and try to follow them to their cars or get them to leave with him. Thankfully, every single one of us found police faculty to help us before anything escalated. To this day, over 10 years now, LOL, I still think about how, if I hadn't listened to my gut, even though I thought I might have been overreacting, what could have happened. I pray that he never successfully attacked, like kidnapped someone. Unfortunately, I don't remember the guy's name, so I can't look him up. Stay safe, y'all. Listen to your gut. So I go for nighttime walks with my fiancé. We'll call him Mr. Sir. We're working on cardio and just love the cool night sky. Yesterday we left around 2000 hours. We went our usual path just outside our neighborhood and then noticed a girl with her phone light on just spazzing out. We didn't think much of it OFC, so we just kept walking. Mr. Sir just says, "What is she doing?" So I slow down and look to where he's locked on, and there was the same seizure-inducing lights coming right towards us. The hardly visible, long, skinny girl just jumped down on the grass from the sidewalk, hurtling towards us, screaming in the most horrific way possible. Once we're both just looking at her, she runs back to the gated sewage tunnel and just crouches down with her back facing us, with just the streetlight dimly illuminating the color of her clothes and long limbs. Afterwards, we started speed walking and continued our way, nervously laughing about how weird that was all while looking behind us often, just expecting to see her running towards us making that blood-curdling scream again. Once we made a turn to the main road sidewalk, we approached a facility, the type that has an entrance that isn't visible until you're right in front of it. Mr. Sir stops and quickly turns us around as soon as the corner became visible. "There's a guy just standing back there. Here, get in front of me," he says sternly. I look and there's a huge guy in a dark hoodie just standing in the corner. So unoriginal now that I think about it. I'm freaking out at this point, quietly babbling and insisting we just go back the house. Yes, that would put us back in the direction with the weird girl, but I was willing to take the chance. Mr. Sir reassured me and said we should continue walking straight away from the facility, down to a path leading to a farther but safe and well-lit neighborhood. I thank God for that. Honestly, I realize now that would have just led him straight to where we live. That is, if he didn't pull anything before we made it there. Mr. Sir looks back and says he's popping his head out. I look too, repeatedly, and every time this guy kept getting closer, walking stiff but swift. He was right up to the wall in the dark night, so I could barely see him, but he was huge, so it was noticeable if you really focused. We eventually made it to the neighborhood and made multiple turns in the windy area. Things finally calmed down, and once we passed a home with a police car parked in the driveway, things felt okay again. With that, we enjoyed the rest of our walk, chatting and watching night birds circling the lampposts, and eventually made our way home. I usually feel ridiculously paranoid due to past experiences, but this time I was comforted. God bless strong men and first responders.
Back in 1998, I was a pretty broke 19-year-old guy and living with a roommate named Steve. Steve was about my age, maybe a year older. His dad had died a few years prior and had left Steve a trust fund which covered all his bills and gave him a weekly allowance on top of it until he reached a certain age, at which time he'd receive his full inheritance. Steve and I got along pretty well, but he was the kind of guy who liked to remind you if he had some degree of power over you. That aspect of his personality butted up against my own stubborn, prove the world wrong attitude on a particular night, leading to the events I'm about to describe. Steve and I went over to my friend Trevor's house on Siesta Key one night. Steve drove, as I didn't have a car. I don't remember why we went over there, and I don't even know that I really remember any other instance of the three of us hanging out. I just know that we went there later in the evening, maybe 9 o'clock or so. At some point, Steve and I got in a disagreement over something. I have no memory of what it was about, except that I seem to recall that it wasn't anything important that actually impacted our lives in any way. Something akin to disagreeing over a bit of movie trivia, or something as inconsequential as that. Steve must have felt that he was losing the debate, because he took the opportunity to remind me that he had the car, and I could always walk home. Now there are a few things to note here. First, home would be a 13-mile walk. I could not have told you that at the time, but I just looked it up for this telling. Second, we were at my best friend's house. I had stayed over there countless times and absolutely could have that night. Third, my best friend also had a car and would likely have given me a ride. So Steve's threat was completely empty, whether he realized it or not. But what was important to me at that moment was that Steve, the trust fund brat, wanted to exert control over me because his ego was bruised. And I was a stubborn hothead who would absolutely not stand for that nonsense. So I silently decided that I would walk home, just to damn spite him and show him that I wouldn't be intimidated. So a bit later, under the pretense of going to use the restroom, I left the room and quietly left the house and started the 13-mile walk home. I should note that, while I knew this was a long walk, I didn't quite understand how long it was. But it didn't matter. I needed to prove my independence. It was probably 11 p.m. or so when I left the house. I anticipated that they'd come looking for me when they discovered that I had left. So I tried to stay off the main path as best I could, determined to make the whole walk in order to make my point. This may be a good place to remind you that this is 1998 and a good 2 or 3 years before I got my first cell phone. The first hour and a half went by without incident. I made my way all the way to downtown Sarasota. The more direct route would have been to follow the main road along the waterfront, but I cut through downtown still looking to avoid Steve spotting me on his way back home. This is an area I was super comfortable with. I'd spent most of my childhood in the area, and, especially in my teen years, had explored every nook and cranny of the downtown area. It was also a pretty affluent area, full of high-rise condos that look out over the Gulf of Mexico, and known for theater, opera, and art galleries. As such, even past midnight, it didn't feel menacing at all, just quiet and empty. The path I'd chosen through downtown went along Pineapple Avenue, which was mostly art galleries and upscale shops. As I walked along, I saw a red hatchback sitting in the middle of the road, just a little way past an intersection up ahead of me. I noticed it had no license plate, but didn't think too much of it. I figured it was a tag applied for kind of situation. As I got nearer, the car remained stopped. The interior light was on, and I could see there were 3 or 4 guys in there. The interior light being on made me assume they were looking at a map or something, though I couldn't make out the inside of the car well enough to see anything more than the general shapes of the people. As I crossed the small intersection, maybe 30 or 40 feet away from the car now, I suddenly got a really uneasy feeling. I don't know if the car was still for just too long, or the figures inside too still, or what. I just suddenly got to feeling very ill at ease. So instead of continuing on, I casually turned down the left side street, and as soon as the corner of the building blocked me from their view, I bolted. This was a spot where a small access road ran behind these buildings and then connected to an alley, and then another, very thin alley that ran alongside a church and ended back on Pineapple Avenue, right where the red car was. I ran this sequence of alleys and popped out just in time to see the rear end of the car vanish down the side street I had run down. At this point, I wasn't scared at all. I had the idea that the guys in that car had something unpleasant in mind for me, but I knew damn well that I had given them the shake. There's no way in hell that they'd expect me to be back where they started. If they were looking for me, it was going to be elsewhere. So I continued along, feeling smug. After 10 or 15 minutes, I pretty much had to get out on the main road, because the alternative was walking through a seedy neighborhood that I wasn't nearly as confident about as I was downtown. As I approached the first big intersection along that main road, I saw the red car again up ahead, noticeable by the lack of license plate. I kinda grinned to myself about having foiled them. On this big road, there were some other cars here and there even at this late hour, so I felt less isolated and more at ease, until I saw the car slow to a crawl, despite not being anywhere near the light yet. Suddenly I found myself wondering if they might have spotted me again, so I decided to just cross to the other side of the street. It's a US highway, so it's several lanes wide, with a median down the center. Being on the other side would put me a fair distance from them. But when I got to the other side, that's when I realized I was in actual danger. This red hatchback suddenly sped up, racing to the intersection ahead, and zipped over into the left lane, where it banged a tire-screeching U-turn to head back in my direction.
This is a completely true story and just happened an hour ago. Wanted to talk about it somewhere, and the only place I could think of was surprisingly this subreddit. For context, my wife and I are on vacation in Mexico. We both honestly are loving it here, and this situation doesn't change that, but I am reevaluating security. My wife and I went out to dinner and walked back to our hotel. We get inside our room, are setting things down, etc. A few minutes go by and there's a knock at the door. A man quietly says something in Spanish in an inflection that's trying to get our attention. Think room service or something. My wife looks at me like wondering who would be at the door. At this point, I should clarify that we had the "Do Not Disturb" tag on the door. A few seconds go by, and there's another knock at the door. My wife signals for me to go to the door, and so I go over. At this point, we've made no sounds for probably a minute before and during the knocks. Just as I reached the door, the key card unlocked the door and it opened. A dirty-looking man had just opened the door and is about 2 feet from my face. I put my hand on the door to prevent it opening any further. I think he was as surprised as I was. He starts speaking Spanish and I hear the word Wi-Fi somewhere in there. I say no hablo español. In broken English, he tries to ask if the Wi-Fi is down. My wife says it's not. I'm just kind of shell-shocked by what just happened and keep my hand on the door as he talks and eventually leaves. I shut the door and engage the physical lock this time. I usually do this, but we had just walked in and wanted to set stuff down. I talk with my wife as we try to gather our thoughts about what just happened. Essentially, a man knocked, got no reply, then let himself in and asks about Wi-Fi. No, this was a clear burglary attempt, and he has a master key card and thought we weren't home. A minute or two later after this went down and we've collected ourselves and understood what just occurred, I pass this information to the front desk in case this guy attempts other doors. They seem to take it seriously. No updates beyond that. The fact this just happened has my mind kind of blown, and I don't know if I've fully processed it yet. Like, what if we were back 30 minutes later? Probably would have lost some stuff. 5 minutes later, we walk in on a guy in our hotel room. What if we went to bed earlier tonight? Could have been asleep. The AC is loud, and I don't know if I would have heard the door knocking through my sleep. If it was going to go down, surely the way it did was optimal, but those ifs are crazy. I'll definitely be storing our valuables in the safe now. Should have done this too, but we just recently got here. Lesson learned. In the future, stuff is going immediately into the safe, and lock is getting immediately engaged.
Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.